G'day guys, Matt here from Not in the Manual. Today I just want to run through the software update 2022.36.2. Came out recently. I was sick with COVID when it came out. I was in isolation. One of our daughters is doing her end of high school examination, so I didn't want to risk giving it to her and her missing her exam, so I isolated from the rest of the family. And yeah, a couple of weeks before that, I'd had a cold as well. So I've had a bad run of trying to get videos done. So you just have to be patient with me. I'm not going to be the sort of guy that's going to have a new video out every week. I'm still new to editing videos, so I do take a long time to get them done. And this is now my fourth or fifth attempt at making this video because I've had some issues getting the colors right here. It was exposure or something. So, you know, to record a 20-minute video and then have to re-record it multiple times, it does take some time, and you don't realize sometimes it looks okay on the screen of the camera or the phone or whatever, and then once you get it into processing on the computer, you just realize something's not right, and it can often be really difficult to correct at that editing stage. With the camera equipment I've got, this is the best I can do. So I've ended up using a DJI Osmo Pocket that I've had for a few years. So that's a little handheld gimbal camera, but it's got its strengths and weaknesses as well. So anyway, I think this should work out okay. You can see here I've got version 11, 2022 36.2. So that's the latest at the moment. I think .4 is rolling out, which will just be bug fixes. Let's get into it. Look at the release notes. Okay, so there's quite a few things here in this update. So the biggest thing of this update, or one of the biggest things, is the Energy app. So this has been redone. So it's had a huge overhaul. So now the difference here, we're going to run through it anyway. This will be the bulk of this video, will be the Energy app and what's in that new Energy app and how to interpret it. So get a lot more information as to where the energy is going in your car. If you've got Scan My Tesla set up in your car, you've already got a good idea of what's going on anyway, how much energy the different systems of the car consume. So if you don't have Scan My Tesla, then this is great. It's going to give you a lot more information. The next update is Sentry Mode Live camera access. Now, America has had this for a long time now. We've missed out. So, you know, I've made a video on that, and I can show you how that works. You need to turn it on in your car first by going into Controls, Safety, and turn on you know, View Live Camera via mobile app. You have to give permission in the car first. And yeah, so that was something I couldn't use while I was in isolation. So yeah, I've had a chance to spend a bit of time with these features now. So that's good. So Sentry Mode Live camera access, I don't see it something I'm going to use regularly. Actually, the other day I had my bike on the back of the car and I'd parked in a public car park. The bike was locked, but you just don't know how safe it is sometimes. Bikes do get stolen. So I was able to just check on my bike every now and again on the rear camera, just make sure no one was hanging around having a look at it. So I did actually get some practical use out of it. So I think if you're parking your car in a not so great area and you just want to check that there's no one lurking around the car before you come back to it, then I think that's great. If you're on your own and you're going back to an area where you don't feel entirely safe, you can look around the car, and I think that's going to be the best use for it. And I don't see myself using it all day every day. So maybe it's a weather thing. You want to check on your car as well and see what the weather's like. So you know, I think as time goes on, you'll work out what a good practical use is for you. And so that was quite good. I even tried it in my garage at night where it's pitch black and you first turn it on, you can't see anything, but you can actually just flash the headlights. There's a flash headlights button at the bottom of the screen, and there's also a honk horn. So I guess if you had someone hanging around the car and you just wanted to move them on, you could honk the horn and give them the hint. But yeah, the flash lights thing was quite good because you can flash that, and for a second there you get a good view around the cameras, and you can keep flashing those headlights and get a look. So even if it's dark, it's still usable. The next one here is the battery heating performance. That has been improved. I haven't had a chance to test this out yet, but for me, I was always pretty happy with it. If you're navigating to a supercharger on a long trip, it would always have enough time to heat the battery up anyway. It would take about 20 minutes to half an hour to get it up to 40 degrees plus, depending on what the starting temperature is. But usually took about half an hour to get it up that 10 or 15 degrees that was required. Be interesting to see how long it takes now. I think it would be handy if you have a supercharger close to your house and you're doing a long trip, and yeah, see, like I'm at 28% now, and say I don't have access to charge at home, but I'm doing a long trip tomorrow, I might want to top that up before I go, starting on my trip. So if I'm going to a supercharger close by and I want to make the most of the speed, then if this could preheat the battery from around 20 degrees up to 40 degrees for quick, for a nice good speed supercharging, then that would be great, because I've got a supercharger that's only sort of 10 or 15 minutes from my house, and it's not enough time to get the battery up to temperature. But to be honest, if you turn up to a supercharger with your battery at 25, 30 degrees and you just start charging, it does heat it up pretty quickly. And just the fact of pumping all that current into the car and using the rear motor and the heat pump to help heat that battery, it does actually heat it up pretty quick once you're at the supercharger. So, unless it's probably going to save you maybe 5 or 10 minutes in a charging session, depending on how fast you want to charge, or how far, what level you're going to be charging up to. So that could become quite handy. So we can now see additional media player data details and the ETA to a destination, so when you're navigating. So I think I've got a video of that. I think if you're picnicking around the car and you've got the doors open, or camping and you've got some music playing through the car, it might be handy if you're not sitting in the driver's seat to see what song is playing, and you can just skip to the next one. You can't actually go in and choose and interact with it, unless if you've got Spotify, then you can actually send, you can already do that through Spotify on your phone app anyway. So I don't know how useful this is going to be, really. ETA to the destination, I think, if you had someone borrowing your car, or, like if one of your kids was borrowing your car and you wanted to see how far they were from a destination, just to sort of check up on them and for safety reasons, without bothering them while they're driving. Dynamic brake lights. So this is something I haven't had a chance to test out yet, because the roads have been pretty wet and it's not really safe for me to sort of be driving above 50 kilometers an hour and jump on the brakes forcefully. So I will test that out, but probably I'll do it as a separate video. I think that's great. I think the more you can highlight that your car is having to brake suddenly, then that is great. I think the indicators on the back of the Tesla are very, very small. So any additional things Tesla can do to make the car a bit more obvious, either brake lights or indicator lights, then that's great. That's good. We can get additional details from superchargers. So that's quite good. I'm not going to show that to you right now because you can accidentally navigate to the supercharger. I might show it to you later on after we've looked at the Energy app. A couple of attempts at making this video, I actually went in to look at the supercharger details at this point, and it started navigating to the supercharger, and then it clears the trip data that you want to look at in the Energy app. So yeah, I made that mistake a couple of times, so I had to reshoot the video. So that's quite good. It's sort of like, when you look for a shop on Google, you look up the shop, it's got the opening times, and then they have this little graph of when people visit the shop, so you can look at the busy times and the quiet times. This is the same thing. A lot of the other info you get here, I think with cost and things like that and fees, I think we're already there, but it's a little bit more obvious now. The next part of the next release note is car left open notifications. Now, I don't know how useful this is going to be for me. I have the auto door lock set, so I'm not really seeing this as too useful for me. Possibly if you didn't have the auto door lock set, it'd be a pretty handy thing for the car to let you know that you've forgotten to lock it. Always good to see more countries getting their language support. I think that just really is a great thing, and it shows that Tesla are really thinking of all these other countries in the different languages. So that's a great thing too. So yeah, that's it here. There's a couple of undocumented changes. There is there's an app update that works in with this update that allows you to unlatch the driver's door remotely. And that's quite good if you live somewhere really cold and you get frozen door handles. Here in Australia, where I live, not so useful, but it's a great feature anyway, and it's good to see Tesla coming up with a solution to the frozen door handle issue. So that's quite good and is going to be useful with the Northern Hemisphere winter coming up. There's also a couple of other undocumented changes. There is cabin overheat temperature, being able to customize that, but we don't have that turned on here in Australia, so I can't show you that. We still have it default to 40 degrees Celsius, so yeah, that hasn't come through to us yet. Maybe maybe in the next update. So yeah, let's have a look at the energy app, and then I'll tack on a couple of videos at the end showing you Sentry Mode Live, and what was the other one? The app where it shows you the extra media information and the destination data. So we'll show you that. But let's get into the energy app, because it's the main thing in this update that I want to explain. Everything else is pretty self-explanatory. So I would have rather do this at work and have my work trip there to show you, or a longer trip, but I've just done this this small 6 kilometer journey, and I think it highlights it. It's got enough data in there for me to explain it to you. So I consumed 2.2% of my battery charge, or I can click up here and change that to kilometers. It was 9.2 kilometers of range consumed, even though I only traveled 5 kilometers. So it just shows you that some of that energy doesn't go into actually propelling the car forward, the difference in that. So I prefer to have percentage showing. But yeah, so of that 2.2%, it starts breaking it down, and it says, 1.3% of that was driving, 0.2 was climate. There was no battery conditioning because my battery started off pretty warm. 0.6 of that was due to elevation changes, so going up hills. So it does just break it down like that. So that's really a part of your driving, but and everything else is anything that sort of runs off say the 12 volt system. So your chargers, and where you can look here, info, press on info at the top and it breaks it down. So it shows what driving includes, it shows what the climate includes, and it talks about the battery conditioning and elevation. So energy consumed or gained due to elevation changes. So that gives you the overall figure at the end from going uphill and downhill. And my trip to work, I actually get that to show a positive figure. So the overall energy consumption due to elevation is actually positive. So you're putting energy back into the battery. So, and everything else, energy consumed to charge personal electronic devices and power onboard computers, lights, audio system, and more. So I guess everything that runs off the 12 volt system, other than climate, something to do with the climate. So we saw that there. Now this graph here, if you forget about the bottom section, this is the same old trip graph that you had before. It shows you how you're going against and comparing that against the projected the projected trip consumption. So your car knows the elevation data for your trip. When it plans the trip, it has all that information, and it predicts a battery percentage when you arrive at your destination. So as you're traveling along this, you will see a grey line in the background, which is the projected trip, and then you will see these colours change as to whether you're doing you're going along with that projected, or whether you're falling short of that consumption, so you're using more energy than predicted. So you can see for sections of this trip, I put my foot down a bit further and accelerated a bit harder to try and get it worse than the projected, and you can see that gap. And now it makes that a lot more obvious with this app update. So you can see those yellowy orangey areas where I'm doing worse than the projected consumption, but then you can see I make up for it further down. And then overall, I'm in the green. So overall, I did better than the projected. I arrived with a higher percentage than what was originally projected. So that's quite good. So I know my driving style. So what this helps you do, it's useful for a long trip, so that you can see that projected change. So if the weather changes and all of a sudden you're doing, having worse consumption due to weather, that allows you to plan. You might not be able to get to that supercharger that you originally planned to get to. And the car sometimes isn't going to tell you that, because it still thinks that 5% might be okay, but you might want a bit more headroom, a bit more of a safety margin for going to that supercharger. So then you can then make the decision, looking at this trip prediction, as to whether you're going to want to stop earlier at a different supercharger, or may not be a supercharger, maybe another charging option, a non-Tesla charger, fast charger. So this really is good. This is the dose of reality, as opposed to this guessometer up the top here. And we will look at that, because you do have the option of comparing against that rated range as well. So this here I find is quite good. And day to day, if you're sort of thinking, wow, I'm using a lot of energy on my commutes, and you want to be a bit more energy conscious and think, where can I save some energy? Well, this is breaking it down for you. So the bulk of it is still driving. And this is what I've always said with the car: forget about, leave your climate on I always set mine to 21.5, and I just leave it on auto and let the car worry about the climate. If you're leaving your climate set to auto and have it on a reasonable temperature, then it's not going to be a huge contributor to your consumption. So the biggest thing is your driving style, and I've always said that. So if you want to be efficient driving and get the most out of your range, just be careful how you drive. If you're using your brake pedal a lot, that's probably because you're not planning, you're not watching ahead. Your driving style isn't great, so you're having to brake and put your foot on the brake pedal because regen isn't enough, because you haven't allowed enough time to pull up behind the car in front of you. So you've got that part of your driving style. You've got harsh acceleration. So you're in a lot more control over how much energy this car uses. Everything else the car takes care of itself. It'll manage the battery conditioning, and even that won't be a huge contributor. It's your driving style. So I'd be really careful about that. If you find you can't control yourself and you want to, it's addictive, the acceleration of these cars, and you might just want to put it in chilled mode instead of standard, and that will save you. It won't give you a harsh acceleration. So you could try chilled mode. The car will actually give you suggestions here if you've fallen short of predicted, but I overall kept to the predicted consumption for my trip, so it's not giving me any suggestions here. So that means I've done quite well. If it's giving you suggestions here, you've got room for improvement. So that's that trip screen. So we can now go to the rated screen for the trip, and I don't know if this is very useful, because the rated range of the car, not rated range, but rated consumption, is based off a test that is unrealistic for the average driver. in my opinion. So it's an EPA test in the US, and that's where, you know, this guessometer range comes from. So yeah, that's basically based off what the rated consumption of the car is, which I think is what, 130 or 135 watt hours per kilometer. So you know, I think that sort of consumption is achievable on you know, my commute to work, to and from work, is, I think it's 90 something watt hours per kilometer one direction, and then 160 the other, and that averages to what, 130, 140 watt hours per kilometer. So it's not like you're going to be a long way from that, but this guessometer range is really, really difficult to achieve, and for a lot of people, especially in a town here like Sydney where there's a lot of hills. And you can see here, comparing against the rated, I'm falling short with a lot of that trip, because this drive was a climb back up to the elevation where my house is from where I was. So you can see there, I don't know how useful this is. Yeah, I'm struggling to, you know, I wouldn't use this screen, the rated side of it. But if you want to have a look at how your trip was compared to your average, or how close you were to your average consumption. And you can see there, it's not realistic. Going down hills, I'm well and truly exceeding that, but that's because I was going down a hill. So I just don't, but you know, I guess if you did want to break it down and see why you're not able to achieve the rated consumption, then you know, this is good. This might be good for you to get a dose of reality when you first get the car and realize that, you know, that 420 or 415 or 430 or whatever it says at 100% is just, it's not based off your driving style. It's based off the average consumption, you know, of an algorithm that's put into the car. That's not, you can't control that. Whereas this trip, you can control that with your driving style, and you know, against a more realistic predicted range or predicted consumption for a trip. So this is the most useful screen. So the next tab we have is park. Now this is quite good, because this can, you know, when you're first learning about the car, you can see here that sitting here parked in my garage since I've returned from that other trip, I've consumed 1.2% battery. And let's have a look at what that is. I mean, screen time, I've been sitting in here preparing for this video, you know, using some things here, sitting in the car, it's been a bit idle. So, you know, 1% is the time through the screen. I've got the brightness set to maximum for the video and things like that. So it's a little bit unrealistic to what you might normally see. Now, my advice here is limit your use of sentry mode if you're concerned. So you might find that the car is sitting parked for a while, and you come back and you've lost 10% over a few hours, and you're thinking, oh, where did all that go? Or usually it's about over a 24-hour period, sentry mode will use about 20% of your battery charge. So it is a killer, keeping that sentry mode active, having it actively, it's a security camera system basically. So you're keeping part of the car alive. It's got the cameras. It's, you know, it's looking for movement to activate that system. So it's keeping the computer in the car running. It's going to consume a lot of energy. So, you know, be very careful of your use of sentry mode. But if you know that it's going to use a lot of power, then don't use it. I've turned it on manually here at home. Normally I don't have it on in my garage at home. So it does consume a lot of power. So I think this is quite good if you're getting used to the car and you're trying to wonder where that energy loss is going when the car's parked. This can tell you. Maybe you've got sentry mode on and you don't even realize. So you can have a look at this and say, wow, you know, the last couple of hours my sentry mode has been the bulk of the consumption. So normally you might use 1 or 2% per week if the car's just sitting idle and you're not using sentry mode. So to be using 1.3% in, I don't know, how long have I been idle here? I think I've only been home for about an hour. So you know, see now it's starting to give me some range tips. Some using the touchscreen while parked will use energy. Consider plugging in a charger. So yeah, it's given me some advice there already. What you can do here is also press on the info button, and it does break down and give a better explanation. I'm not going to read all those out, it'll take too long. So you've also got the option here to say since last drive or since last charge. And this is a bit glitchy because I say since last charge. If you have a look, I've got 28% left in this battery. So I just don't. It's telling me that there's only been 1.5% consumed. Well, oh, that could be right. 1.5% since last charge, because yeah, I haven't really used Sentry mode that often. I just don't often see a change, much of a change there, but maybe I just haven't used it enough. Since last drive. See, that still hasn't changed. So yeah, I don't know. I might need a bit more time with that. But definitely, if you do since last drive, you'll pull up, have your car parked, you come back and say, wow, I've lost 10%. You can just go in and have a look and see where that's gone. So that could be handy. This consumption screen is exactly the same as the old one. I think they've tweaked the colors a little bit. And I really like using this because when you're doing long trips, it gives you the realistic consumption, realistic range prediction. So this is different from back on this other screen where you had you were going to arrive with a predicted battery percentage. This is different. This is giving you just raw consumption and then giving you a range prediction from that. So what you can do is you can get it to use your average range for the last 10 kilometers, the last 25, and the last 50 kilometers. So you need to pick the one there that is going to be the most relevant to the trip that you're doing at the time. And you can see here the last 50 kilometers, it's saying I averaged 140 watt hours per kilometer, you know, which is pretty good. But if I compare that to the guessometer at the top here, it's not too far out. It's only 13 kilometers out, and down at this end of the battery, you know, the battery state of charge, 13 kilometers isn't a huge deal. You're never really running the car down to 0%. So I think it's only a real concern there if you're running the car down to the wire. But I'm not doing that. So if we look for the last 25 kilometers, I'm not going to be as good because I've had a lot of uphills. And you can see here where I've been uphill, you know, my consumption has been higher, and then I've come down a hill and I've been regenerating energy back into the car. And so this is taking an average of your consumption in that window, 146 watt hours per kilometer. It then looks at how much kilowatt hours are left in the battery to zero. And it says you can go 99 kilometers based on that until you hit 0%. So if I look at the last 10 kilometers, it's going to be even worse because look at that climb up to my house and then, you know, the flat to my house along my street. So you can see here I had a really steep downhill, and then I had to climb back up, and actually climbed up a lot higher and then came down. So that's going to give you a bit more of a realistic figure as to where your driving is right now. On a long trip, I tend to just leave it on 50 kilometers. And if you're doing hundreds of kilometers, the last 50 kilometers is going to give you a bit more of a realistic prediction of range. So you can see there, it's going to be less influenced by the ups and downs of a couple of little hills and climbs. So that's going to be a bit more realistic. So put that back to percentage. The other option you've got here is instant range. So what it's doing, it'll leave you looking at the last 50 kilometers. But instant range allows you to change your driving style or change your speed and look at the impact of that instantly. So it's looking at data points of consumption right then and there at the time when you're driving. So you can turn your climate off. Straight away, you'll see what extra range you're going to get by having your climate off. You can go from 100 kilometers an hour down to 90 kilometers an hour and see what difference it makes to the range straight away. So it still factors in your 10, 20, 50 kilometers, but it's looking at that window and it's saying straight away, okay, if you change, you slow down to 90, that's going to give you an extra 10 Ks or kilometers of range. So that's quite handy on a long trip. So you know, I don't know. The more you use these features, the more useful they become to you, the more familiar you become with them. So that's the energy app. That's all the changes there. I don't think there's anything I've missed there. We go rated. Actually, rated I didn't show. You can look at current drive or since last charge as well. Doesn't make much of a difference there. As I said, I'm not too interested comparing against the rated. I think once you've got that figure of the 135 or 130 watt hours per kilometre in your head of the average consumption of this car, that's all you really need to know. So yeah, guys, I'm pretty impressed with this. Negatives. My one big negative is how small that graph is now. So I don't really like how small that graph is. For people like myself that have my eyesight isn't the best, I really find it hard to read here. And even filming this video, I've had to lean right in to try and read some of these figures here. So that's my only negative with this. Okay, so that's it for the energy app. Remember to comment no matter how silly you think your question is. I guarantee you someone else is thinking the same thing. I get real satisfaction out of answering your questions, and I really enjoy that. As I said before, I've done technical support for many years. Don't think it's going to bother me. I'm really happy to answer them. So ask away. If you've enjoyed this video, make sure you subscribe. So if everyone subscribed that watch my videos, I'd have a lot more followers. I'd be reaching a lot more people. So and you wouldn't miss out on the videos when they come out. So what we're going to do, I've got another couple little videos to do. We'll look at live Sentry mode. We will look at the app improvement for the extra data, for the extra trip data and the extra media information. So they'll just be a couple of short videos.